So now that I have given you all the memorization part to differentiate trig functions, let's go to the sample problems. Now it is important to note that the questions in your textbooks are usually not as simple as the memorization part. Most usually you would have to incorporate all the things that you have learned, like the quotient rule, the product rule, and the chain rule, to solve even trig functions. So let's start with the first question. So the first question asks you to differentiate a trig function, a complex trig function. I say this is a complex trig function because there is a function within the trig function. So all you need to do to differentiate this function is to use chain rule. So you would take the derivative of the outer function, which is cosine 2x, and then multiply that with the derivative of the inner function, which is 2. So the final answer that you would be getting is 2 cosine 2x. Let's start with the second question. The second question is asking you to take the derivative of another complex trig function. It is complex because there are 3 sub-functions within this entire function. You would have to use the product rule to take the derivative of this whole function. So you would need to take the derivative of the first function, which is negative sine x, and then multiply that with the second function, cosine x, and then add that with the derivative of the second function, which is negative sine x, and then multiply that with the first function, which is cosine x. So the final answer that you would be getting is negative 2 sine x cosine x. Now it is important to note that you can always rewrite the question. You can rewrite cosine x multiplied by cosine x as cosine squared x. Now since it is in exponential function, it's in exponential form, you could use the chain rule to take the derivative of this function. You would take the exponent as the coefficient, and then you would subtract the coefficient subtract the exponent by 1, and then you would multiply the whole thing with the derivative of the inner function, which is negative sine x. So the final answer that you would be getting is still negative 2 sine x cosine x. So as you can see, whichever way that you choose would get you to the same answer. So what I would suggest for you to do is to choose whichever way that you feel most comfortable with, because eventually they would get you the same answer.